Warning: the following content may be disturbing to some individuals. Consumer discretion is advised. On this episode of Sirens of the Supernatural, though she takes many forms, she is most always associated with death. She sometimes appears as an enchanted beauty and other times as an old hag. Her cry will make your blood run cold, especially if you're of Irish descent, and her story is as mystical as the isles where she originated. She is the Banshee, and she's coming your way right now.
Sirens of the Supernatural. Hello.
Hi.
Yay, we're back. We're back for the 7th episode of season 2. Your Sirens of the Supernatural here. Rhonda and Lindsay with Ryan. We're saying hey after a little break. Everybody's been sick with something up here, it seems like, and we wanted to give everybody a chance to get well. You can hear I'm still not 100%, but I'm here. Feeling good to be here. How about you guys?
Feeling so good.
Feeling
so good to be here.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
What was it, the last episode that I wasn't in, or was there a couple
Yeah,
that I wasn't in?
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. You
I
weren't
had
in
to
the
lay out
last.
because I had the flu and it was really bad.
Yeah.
Bad. But I'm glad to be back.
Good. We're glad to have you back. We missed you. Me and Ryan were winging it on our own over here.
Yeah, it was crazy. It's good when all of us can get together. I'm glad you guys are feeling better. Like you guys said, stuff going around, but there's all, supernatural never rest. So, we've got to get back.
That's right.
Our readers are expecting us to put out some really good content, and tonight is no different. I think tonight we'll be prepared to be intrigued, and yeah, we're going to scare you. So it's going to be fun.
Yes, we love to scare
I'm
you.
so excited.
Well, we thought that with it being the end of March and St. Patrick's Day being in March, pay a little homage to that and to our Irish friends with an episode about banshees. So, what do you guys know about banshees? Do you know anything about them?
I just know that usually, like, it's an old lady that has like scraggly white hair and looks real creepy and like screams before somebody dies or cries.
Okay. How about you, Ryan? What have you heard?
It's very similar. Just an old witchy looking lady that's very cryptid, that screams and either to attract people or to scare people off, which always have very bad intentions. So, it's the opposite of like a siren who sings a beautiful song to tempt people.
Yeah.
This is like the opposite. So, it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to jump in here, share some information with our readers, and learn a few new things.
Yeah. Well, I learned a few new things as I was researching. So I'm going to take us way, way, way back. So have either of you ever heard the word keening? Keening?
I feel like I have before heard the word, but I couldn't tell you now what it means.
Okay, well, it comes from a Gaelic word that is pronounced cuinift, and it means to cry or to weep. And in the Gaelic tradition, which is over in Ireland, Scotland, that area, Wales, keening is a traditional form of vocal lament and mourning for the dead. It's a ritual they perform like at a wake or graveside service when someone dies. Now, references to keening are found as early as the 7th century, but many people believe that it's older than that even. But it's a Gaelic tradition that carries on even to this day in parts of Ireland and Scotland. And there is a tie in here, so I'll get there. And other countries have some similar traditions too, but it's mainly the Gaelic tradition that we're going to talk about. So keening was performed by women, and they were often plucked from the lower stations of society to learn funeral keening from other keening women to keep the tradition alive. And it was a ritual that it was kind of like a song, a lament that these women would do during the wake or the service, and it would help carry help the bereaved carry their grief and draw it out. So it gave everyone a chance to feel the pain and sorrow. And the mourners would join in sometimes with the keening and sing as a unified group. And they considered it something that was soothing and comforting. And the song often had phrases and words that described the deceased person's good qualities and vocalized their own grief because they lost a person. So I have a couple of examples that I found on YouTube
Ooh.
of uh, people doing this keening. And the first one I'm going to play a little clip on my phone. Hopefully, you guys can hear it. I'll just play a little bit of it. This is from a recent interview that they did with a keening woman.
Oh,
And
so
she,
people like still do it.
yes, yes, in some
Ooh.
parts of Ireland and Scotland. So here we go.
Ooh.
Okay, so that's just a little example. And then
That
I've got
sounds sweet.
it. Yeah, it sounds very sweet.
Yeah.
Then our producer is going to pull up the sound clip of the next one. And this is also an example of keening. What did you guys think about that? That's kind of weird. I mean, it's different. It's not weird, but it's different.
It's
Right?
almost like a spooky, like it I know it's not supposed to be spooky, but it kind of just sounds a little spooky,
Uh-huh.
but it reminded me of lullabies.
Yeah,
But then
kind
it
of.
also reminded me of like Native American chants, kind of.
Yes.
Because they do like similar vocals almost, but different. Similar
Yeah.
but different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and Ron, did you have something to say?
Yeah, to me, it didn't really come like, yes, it was vocal, but it seemed like it come from a deeper spot. It was more
Yes.
emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like
Yes.
from their soul. It wasn't somebody just singing. It was just raw
Yeah.
emotion coming out. And that's kind of what I got from it. You know, it was a
Mm-hmm.
very sensitive type sound that they was making.
That's perfect because um, as you heard, it's kind of a lament, a lamenting, sad, sorrowful sound. But keening sometimes could go from that to flat out wailing. Okay, like you said, the raw emotion coming out, a guttural womb cry of grief that the body lets out. Um, so perhaps the lament that turns into a wail sometimes is related to the darker tradition um, that the Gaelic people have, and that is the lament or scream of a creature they call the Banshee. And it's called Banshee in their language, but we call it Banshee. And this is how they describe a Banshee. Known as an otherworldly woman or woman of the mounds, a banshee is a female spirit in Irish folklore who heralds the death of a family member, usually by screaming, wailing, shrieking, or keening. And according to Wikipedia, some sources suggest that the banshee laments only the descendants of the pure stock of Ireland, associating with a number of ancient Irish families, those with the Macs and O prefixes, like people with old Celtic names, like the O'Connors and O'Briens, McDougals, McCarthy's, McKays, like we are. Another ancient Irish folklore source said that the Banshee only wailed for the 5 most prominent Irish families: the O'Neills, the O'Connors, the O'Briens, the Kavanaghs, and the O'Gradys. But yet other sources state that an exception, that the Banshee would wail for persons that had died that were gifted with music and song. So they most strongly associate the Banshee with the old family, ancestral homes, and lands. Even when a family member would die abroad, say you were Irish and you were part of this family, you moved to the United States or something, and when the Banshee cried, you wouldn't hear the cry. Your family back home that's living on the family land in the family home would hear the Banshee. It said the cry of the Banshee means a warning of death, and it's said to be experienced by family members and sometimes the local community rather than the dying person. But once the Banshee's scream was heard, death was said to be inevitable. Someone in that family would die. So, to repeat, most manifestations of the Banshee are said to occur in Ireland near the home of the dying person. But some accounts refer to the Banshee wail being heard in Ireland to announce the deaths of Irish people that have moved away from Ireland. But it is those concerned with the death at the family and community levels who usually hear the Banshee. So, what does the Banshee's wail or cry sound like? Well, it's often compared to like a wild animal scream, except they say the scream comes from all directions at the same time, travels at great speed, and repeats and stays just as loud when it repeats as it did the first time. Now, the cry of the Banshee is one of the most associated characteristic traits associated with it, okay? The more fearful Banshees appear as frightening old witches, like Ryan described at the first of the episode. And it said they can emit howls that shatter glass and torment the living. But how did we get from those traditional keening women to this character of the Banshee? In some areas of Ireland, it was believed that the Banshee was formerly a keening woman who had sinned or not performed her job well enough. Okay. So she was banned from keening at wakes and funerals. So I guess she was just mad. I don't know.
Yeah, I would be too. I'd do the same thing.
Yeah.
I'd be like, all right, bet. Listen to this. You don't
Listen
like that?
to this.
Listen to this.
So that may fit the description of the small, aged, disheveled woman with the unbound, wild, free flowing white or gray hair and black clothes, whose screams became a frightening, ominous warning of death. Okay. But other descriptions say that the Banshee takes the shape of a young, enchanting maiden with golden hair dressed in a shimmering white garment. And that description seems to be a lot like one of the older Celtic goddesses that had supernatural powers. So you've got this little keening woman that's, been banned from doing her thing. And then you've got this beautiful goddess on the other side with supernatural powers. So it's not far fetched to see that those two ideas could combine. But it said that she, the Banshee, can change her appearance at will. So sometimes, if she wants to look like a little witchy woman, she can do that. And other times, she's seen as a beautiful maiden. And many times, she is seen combing her long hair and tearing it out in anguish. Yeah. So we've got 4 images, if you're watching on YouTube, that we're going to pull up and just take a look at some of these descriptions of the Banshee.
Girl.
So this looks less like an older witchy woman. This one looks more like a youthful, all those kind of scary maiden.
Is she bleeding from her eyes, actually, though?
I don't know. It looks like it kind of, doesn't it?
She's pissed. She is beyond mad.
She's mad, yeah.
And she has one regular arm and one skeleton arm, which is a really nice touch.
I just noticed that.
That's a really nice touch.
Nice touch. Let's bring up the next one. Okay. Now, this one, that's pretty scary. That is way scary. I don't even know what
Honestly,
that
though,
is.
it's kind of goals. Like if I had to come back as something,
It looks like the female version of Gollum or something.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see another one. This one's my favorite. Yeah. Oh, she looks.
She's doing some singing. Okay,
She really
she's either
is.
singing or really she wailing.
Yes. We will post these on our socials too, so listeners can see them. I think we got one more. This one's pretty good too. Yeah, she's got some like wild Cruella de Vil hair going on too. So that gives you a little description about how they are perceived to look. However, the Banshee is more often heard than she is seen. Some say that they heard the cry for several nights in a row before experiencing the loss of a loved one, and some say they only heard her one time on the eve of the person's death. So, who wants to listen to a few examples of what banshees supposedly sound like?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, now remember, if you heard this scream, it didn't necessarily mean you would die soon, but someone in your family would. So let's have our producer bring up the first audio clip and hear this. Okay, that's the first one. That's pretty wild.
Woo!
But I like. What, Ryan? What were you going to say?
I said that's freaky. And from those pictures, the women and their expressions, and you notice that some of them look like they might have had blood from their eyes or from their face. Almost looks like they're in pain or there's some kind of raw emotion or hurt or sheer anger in their emotion, because you can tell by their facial expressions how their face is distorted and contorted, and their body is like they're giving it all.
They're giving it their all. That's right.
Yeah, they're doing something, and something's going on there, and that's some freaky noises. I don't know what I would do if I heard that.
Well, this next one is my favorite because it adds in the sound of the banshee crying and screaming. So let's listen to this last little audio clip. What'd y'all think of that one? No.
We both did the same thing. We were just like, no.
A little spooky.
Could you imagine being camping and hearing something like that? You're like deep in the woods and like,
yeah, exactly. I'd be booking it out there. So there are many stories, a lot older stories, but some are more recent, of people's encounters with what they felt had to be a banshee. I'm going to turn it over to you guys now and let you tell us about some of your research and stories, and then I'll close with a recent story from the Emerald Isle. So take it away. Ron, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I've got one that kind of a local based story. And it's very interesting. It intrigued me. And this was actually done by like a news reporter. So this is about the Tennessee Legends, the White Bluff Screamer. So this is in Dickson County, Tennessee, which is not far from where we're at. And this was reported by Aaron McCullough only 5 months ago.
Ooh, 5 months ago.
So, yes, and Dickson County, Tennessee, it's done by WKRN. So the woods surrounding Montgomery Bell State Park have long been said to be the home of a mysterious creature known mostly by its screeching wail. Since just after World War I, people in the area have reported hearing the screaming, warned away from the noise of the White Bluff Screamer. So people to this day are still hearing this. And according to the historian Lyle Russell, one of the first encounters with the legendary creature involved a new settler. He was in the area just southwest of the present-day White Bluff. The man, his wife, and their 7 children reportedly heard the screaming begin not long after they built their home in the rural lands of Tennessee. At first, the family did their best to ignore the shrieking coming from the woods. Now, if you just build a house and then all of a sudden you start hearing shrieking noises, you're, especially, kind of back when you first settled in, you're like, okay, what's going on? Maybe we need to build another house, right?
Yeah.
So after several days, however, the children grew fearful of the terrible hollering, and the settler's wife was losing sleep over it. So, they can't sleep. This thing is constantly causing them aggravation. I'm sure their animals and stuff was going crazy. So the settler took his lantern outside to attempt to investigate the nearby area to no avail. He couldn't find out what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So every night, just past sunset, the screaming would start up. Every night like clockwork. Ooh. So I can imagine, he's like, hey, kids, look, you need to be home before dark. We're shutting the doors. I ain't, I got to worry about what's going on. So according to the legend, one night the settler sat on his porch at dusk. He had his rifle in his hand, ready to take on the animal, making the horrifying noise. So he's had enough. He's getting ready to get rid of this thing, right? Once the sun set, he told his wife to lock all the doors and windows, and for her and their children's safety, and only to open the door for him when he returned. So this is one of them things like, hey, look, unless it's me, don't talk to nobody.
Yeah.
Through an expert woodsman, the man soon became lost in the forest, trying to track down the creature screaming every night. Each time he thought he was getting closer to it, the sound would move further away from him. It would echo off the trees and the hills, making it difficult to locate the source. So it's just like you said, it sounded like it was coming everywhere, and it got him lost. And he was used to being in those woods.
Mm-hmm.
Soon, however, the creature's shrieks were joined by that of a woman's and children's screams. And the settler rushed home to find his entire family slaughtered in their home.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, he's out trying to hunt this thing, and it drew him to the woods, and then it went back and killed his family.
Got him.
Wow.
And at this gruesome discovery, the legend says the man fell to his knees in horror and grief, and only to be taunted once again by the mysterious screaming. So once he got back and found out what happened, it started again, like taunting him.
Oh.
So in some versions of the tale, the man, blinded by heart-broken rage, sought out the creature again, only to be met by a ghostly female figure enshrouded in a white mist. The spirit floated through the forest, leaving scorched earth beneath her in a blue ethereal fire.
Ooh. So
other versions of the legend say the man encountered a large beast rather than a ghostly figure. The beast had white fur, savage claws, and huge teeth, and was easily twice the size of a man. And reports say the remains of the settlers' original cabin still exist in the White Bluff area, and the screamer can still be heard today, according to Russell. So this is something that is continuous happening now, and it's something that is right here in Tennessee, right down in Dixon County in White Bluff.
And like you said, that's not too far.
We should go.
Lindsay, you want to be slaughtered?
We should go.
Let's go listen. Let's get a real recording of a Banshee.
Yeah, okay.
You might not have to see it, but you can record the sound.
True. Wow, that is some story.
Ugh. And like I said, it's a local story, and they still hear it today. So I wanted to wrap that up because, I want people around here to know that, hey, this stuff still happens, and it could be happening in your backyard.
Yeah.
People right next door, right in the next county, 2 streets down. This stuff is really going on.
Ooh, that's good. That's a good one.
I did not see that coming, that he came home and his whole family was...
Me either. I've never heard that story.
That's
cool.
When I read this, I was like, oh, this is it right here.
Yeah.
This is the one I got to tell.
Yeah. How frustrating that would be, though, to be out in the woods and you know the woods and you shouldn't be lost. And every time you get closer, you think, then this wail gets farther away and sounds like it's coming from a different place. That's
That would
really
drive somebody insane,
yeah.
especially back then.
Yeah.
You don't have any TV or music to drown it out. You just gotta
Right.
listen to it, you know?
Mhm.
Side note, 7 kids? 7
And,
kids?
and think of this. Now, they were told and not to open the door or anything unless it was him. And everything was locked and boarded up, right? Nothing can get in that house unless they open the door for him. So either it can mimic what he sounded like, or
Mm-hmm.
this thing was strong enough it busted everything in and still killed him. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the thing that's scary. It's like, okay, you cannot protect yourself from this.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mm. I didn't think about
Oh,
that.
that's crazy.
That is.
I don't like
What you
that.
got for us, Lynn?
Okay, so I found some stories on Reddit, and so I have 2 of them, and then the last one that I'll talk about is like a couple of noises that it could be, like logically, here's the
Mhm.
animal that this could possibly be, but they're wild. Like they are so scary sounding. So
Gotcha.
this first one that I have is from Bugs to Bugs on Reddit. And they said, my parents came to New York from Ireland in the 1950s. They were strict Catholics and didn't speak about supernatural things too much, but every Thanksgiving we would sit around the table and they would tell us ghost stories. One of the stories they would tell us was about the Banshee. The Banshee is an Irish spirit that foretells the death of a family member by wailing and crying outside the family home. She cries for certain Irish family members, the very old Irish families, the O'Neill, the O'Brien, the O'Connor, and Kavanagh families are some. Supposedly, there are only 6 or 8 families. Years had passed, and I was in my bedroom cleaning out my drawers of my bureau. I was standing next to my bedroom window. We lived in an apartment that was on the 5th floor. The window faced out into an alleyway, and it was dusk when the crying started. First, it sounded like a newborn or a cat crying. Now, I knew my neighbors and didn't know of anyone that had a newborn, but it was an alleyway, and so I thought it was probably a cat. But the crying changed into a young child crying or sobbing, and it was the saddest cry I have ever heard. I tried to lift up my window to call out to the person crying. I thought it was Tommy Kavanagh next door. I yelled out because I could not see anything. There was no light and it was dark. There was no answer, just crying. I yelled out, Tommy, is that you? Are you okay? Do you need help? No answer, just more crying. The sobbing changed again to a woman's sobs. Again, heartbreak sounding sobs coming from an unknown source. My mom came into my room and the crying stopped. I said to my mom, don't you hear that crying? It sounds like someone's really hurt. She said, I don't hear anything. She was in the living room. The apartment wasn't that big. She should have heard the crying. She looked at me funny and shook her head. When she left the room, the crying started again. This was not a crying that was from someone being physically hurt. This was a crying that someone was just told the worst news possible and their heart was broken. That's the only way I can describe it. The crying stopped and I went about my business. 3 days later, at 5:30 in the morning, my father's sister called to tell him their sister Kathleen died. She had leukemia. I forgot to mention our last name is O'Connor. So you got the Kavanaghs and the O'Connors on that
Mhm.
one.
Hmm.
What do y'all think?
I think it's interesting.
I think
Yeah.
it's weird that the crying changed and got older the
Mhm.
longer that it kept crying.
Yeah.
I thought that
Yeah.
was interesting. I didn't find another story like that one where it
Mhm.
changed like that.
Do you think it's to find out which one triggered the most emotion,
Possibly.
Could
whether it
be,
was
That's a
yeah.
good point.
for an older person or to maybe emphasize or build on emotion?
Yeah.
And so the mom couldn't hear it.
Mm-mm.
That's interesting too.
Just the son or daughter, whoever was telling
Hmm.
the story, was the only one that could hear it. Okay. So that was my first story. Let me find my second one. Okay. All right, and also, this one's just a tad bit longer, but I do want to do like a quick trigger warning for suicide on this one. So
Okay.
if that's something that would bother you, maybe skip ahead just a couple minutes. Okay, so this one's from Archita, I think, and it's called I Think I Heard a Banshee. I've been wondering about this for years, and maybe someone here can help me. I've read multiple stories about banshees, a creature whom has always fascinated me. Some detail how they predict death, others how they scream when a death of a loved one or someone you know is impending, and when I was 15, I think I may have heard one. For context, I live in Montreal, Canada. For anyone who's ever been, you've probably noticed we're surrounded by water, forests, and mountains. It was up in these mountains that I had this experience. My school's ninth grade class always took an art, music, and drama trip each spring around April up into the mountains to a camp designed for school retreats. We stayed 3 days, therefore had our own cabins to sleep in. The girls' cabin was the closest to the woods at the back of the property. This is important because I distinctly remember the layout of the property, and there was no reason for anybody, student or otherwise, to be past the cabins. Not to mention, there was still a lot of snow on the ground and no footprints going into or out of the woods. We were a small class, so I noticed rather quickly that a few students were missing. No problem. Not all of us were into our classes enough to want to leave the comfort of the city for quality time with each other. But there was one student I was worried about. For privacy, I'll call him Kyle. Kyle was a quiet kid, didn't have many friends, but seemed happy enough, though there was a sadness around him that I couldn't help but notice. He seemed lonely under his smile. He didn't come, which surprised me because he was one of the drama kids and all the others had shown up. He stayed with me the whole trip. I didn't know why, but I couldn't get him out of my head, and on our last day, I realized why. Everyone was getting ready to leave. Most of the girls and all the guys had dragged themselves to the front drive to load up onto the bus, but a couple of friends of mine and myself were taking a bit longer. I dragged myself out of the cabin and was listening to the chatter and laughter coming from my left, which was the direction of the bus, when out of nowhere I heard an ear-splitting scream come from my right side. I whipped my head around to stare into the dawn-covered forest and saw nothing, but I know that scream came from in there. It was terrifying, like the scream someone would make when they knew they were about to die. Absolutely terrified. Not the scream of gleeful and slightly exhausted teenagers. I turned to my friend in horror, who had barely flinched, and asked her if she heard it too. She said yes, but that it was probably just one of our classmates. I thought it was someone being murdered until another thought crossed my mind. The banshee entered my head, a creature I hadn't thought of all weekend. I had no reason to, but it came and stuck with me for the whole bus ride back. I was a nervous wreck, thinking someone in my family was hurt, but when we got back to the school, we were all ushered straight to our classes. This would have been fun if it weren't for the fact that it was 4 in the afternoon and classes were over. Our principal came in and promptly informed us that Kyle, the classmate I had been so worried about, had attempted suicide. My stomach hit the floor and I went completely numb. I have not felt that level of fear before, nor since, but that truly made me understand how blood can run cold. The next day, a mass email went around to inform all his friends that he had passed away. I don't know if I predicted his death myself or if something in those woods connected with me and decided I needed to know, but I'm nearly completely convinced that what I heard was a banshee. So that one doesn't really tie into anything Irish, but I thought it was really creepy.
Yeah.
And it was almost like this person had like a sixth sense of their friend because it stuck with them all weekend. And then they heard that and Banshee immediately thought of that.
Yeah. That's so strange.
I know.
Hmm.
Really, really creepy. Okay.
Did you have another one or?
Yes, I have some sounds that I'm going to play for you.
Oh.
I know. This first one, and I'm going to pause it and fast forward it. This first one is, the title of it is Rural Vixen Female Fox Screaming. So it's kind of like what do you call those cameras that you put up in trees and it's like night cameras, night vision cameras?
Yeah, like tree cam.
Yeah, like hunters use
Deer
whatever.
cam.
Yeah, a deer
Trail
cam. Yeah. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. Let me fast forward to about. It takes it a little bit to come on, so I'm going to fast forward to about 29 seconds, and I'm not going to play it for that long, really.
And this is a female fox.
It's a female fox, and so this is what some people say. If you're hearing screaming in the woods and you think it's a banshee, it could possibly be this. Are you ready?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I hate it. I hate
Yeah,
that.
me too.
I don't know what they're doing out there. It sounds like she's in pain, but my God, if I was camping and I heard that, I'd be out. I'm packing up and I'm leaving. I don't care if it's a little fox, an animal, I'm out. Because that fox might be possessed by a demon. So we gotta go. I don't like it.
Kind of like a pig or a hog almost.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like when you started playing, I was like, never heard a fox sound like that.
I know. Okay, the second one, it's a barn owl. That's an owl making that noise. That's just a regular barn owl makes that noise.
Wow. You don't think of an owl making that noise.
Truly, if I like really had heard a lot of banshee stories and I was like in a banshee mood and somehow heard this outside, I would be like, yeah, for sure, that's a banshee, and I heard it. I would not think barn owl, and I would not think fox is making that noise. I would go straight to banshee, and I would believe it with my entire being. I would.
Well, I don't know. I think I would be able to tell the difference between like a more human sound.
Yeah.
And that.
Because that one's not really crying. It's more just straight screaming.
Yeah.
So that's true. I guess banshees have to kind of like maybe cry too a little bit in their shtick.
I don't know. That's really strange.
I don't want to say shtick, but their thing, you know.
Yeah, their shtick.
Yeah. I don't know.
All right. Well, did you have anything else before I read?
No, that's all I have.
Okay. Well, I too was on Reddit and I found a story from someone whose name on there is Scroll Sawer. Scroll Sawer on Reddit. This was posted a year ago, okay? And Scroll Sawer is in Ireland. And he writes, when I was a child of 12, I went walking with my father on a frosty winter's night about 8 p.m. This was back in the 80s when there was less traffic in rural Ireland. And it was one of those nights where there's no noise. When we turned to head home, a terrible wailing started. I was terrified. My father said it was a fox, but I could tell that he was disturbed too. We had to walk 2 miles home, and the noise seemed to follow us, not getting louder, but not fading either. When my father put the key in the door, the wailing stopped. My mother said when we walked in, we were white as ghosts. 4 days later, my older brother was killed in an accident in Germany. We never spoke about it until 10 years later. I had moved to Dublin for work, and my father came to stay for a few days. He wasn't a drinker, but we went for a few pints. He got upset and was talking about my brother, and that's when he told me it was definitely the banshee we had heard. He told me he had heard it 4 days before his own father died and said that I would probably hear it again when his time comes. He is still alive but in a nursing home, and I am dreading hearing that noise again. I thought that was interesting.
Could you imagine waiting just to try to, waiting not to hear that sound? Dreading, you know.
And also the fact that like his dad had heard it before,
Yes.
but had to be like, "Oh, it's just a fox.
Yeah, don't be
Let's walk a
scared.
little faster, maybe."
Yeah. And it was interesting too, as soon as he put the key in the door, it stopped.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
was really, and there's tons of stories out there about banshees. There's books, there's movies. Some are better than others. I watched a movie as research. I'll never get that hour and a half back. But anyway, so what are your end thoughts on banshees? I mean, I think it's kind of like all of the other folklore that you hear. It started with some truth. It
Mm-hmm.
started with something. Um, so we kind of talked about how it could have morphed into what the banshees known as today. But there's some truth in every one of those, in all those little folklore stories that come down to us. So, what are your thoughts about it? Do you think it's just an animal out in the woods, or?
I don't know. I feel like I had heard or something I came across when I was doing research on banshees had associated them with the Fae
Mm-hmm.
people in Ireland. And I just think I think we need to do an episode about them anyways because that is just so interesting to me. There's all kinds of different Fae and all kinds of different stories, but I think that's an interesting connection. And honestly, if I was going to be some kind of ghost, I would probably pick that one.
You would.
Yeah, because I really feel like, especially if this came about because they were like, "Oh, you're not doing your job good enough. You're not singing this song good enough for us." The rage that I would feel, I would immediately turn into a banshee. I just know I would. I know I would.
Okay. How about you, Ryan?
I'm, I think, like you said, there's some truth to it. Whether it's actually a banshee per se, and that's all it is. It could be a skinwalker. It could be a spirit, an entity of some sort to try to trick people. Uh, I'm trying to think, and I've been trying to read. Okay, how have people protected themselves from banshees if they are malevolent, kind of like the gentleman in his cabin? For the
Mm-hmm.
most part, the stories were okay. If you hear it scream or if you hear it howl, that means that there's death in the family coming
Yeah.
very
Mm-hmm.
soon. So, how do you differentiate the different types of screams and howls and crying? And another thing is, how in the world do you protect yourself from one? I mean, would a crucifix do it? I mean, do you
Right.
know, put something over your doors? How does all this work? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I
Yeah.
read something about like if you see a comb on the ground, you're not
We'll
supposed to
pick it
pick
up.
it up because that's the banshee's comb and they'll like get you. But I didn't see anything else about banshee attacks besides Ryan's story. So that
Mm-hmm.
makes me wonder, was it a banshee or was it a skinwalker or was it a
Yeah.
shapeshifter that was just trying to pass it off? And then since those are kind of maybe a little evil at the core, they went in and slaughtered the family. I don't know.
Yeah. It could be.
Scary.
The one thing that intrigued me was that, down through the ages, there are many superstitions that predict death. Okay. And it was intriguing to me that these Irish families, had their own like
Yeah.
predictor of death, their own little death warning person
I
thingy.
wonder why that is.
I
Why is it
don't
just
know.
those families?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So
Were they like the
that
founders of Ireland or the main families that everybody else comes from? I don't know.
I don't know.
I
Yeah,
wonder.
it's in the McKays, we had the MAC in front of MACKAY. So that's an interesting tie-in as well. But I never heard, I didn't hear. Ron and I were talking earlier. We didn't hear our granny or mama talk about a creature specifically called the Banshee. So I didn't know about banshees until I was older, and he said the same. It wasn't something that was, important in their superstitious beliefs. Um, they had plenty more that were, but I thought that was an interesting little dive into another culture and the way they do things, and even the keening women, and
Yeah, that
that
was
was
interesting.
interesting, yeah, to me, and that they still do that in parts of those countries.
Yeah.
So before we leave our listeners with their own thoughts about banshees, I want to tell you a little bit about next week's episode. We are so excited to dive into a topic that we have not covered before on this podcast: UFOs and aliens. So get
I'm so
ready.
excited.
We are going to interview Leslie and Stephen Shaw. They are the authors of the UFO book, Who They Are and What They're Up To. That's the name of their book. And we'll discuss UFO evidence, alien abduction, and more. So, listeners, if you're as curious as we are, join us next Friday night to hear that episode. And Lindsay's going to tell us something we have to celebrate.
Yeah. Also, we just want to shout out, we have, I think now over 200 followers on Instagram and almost on Facebook. So thank you to all of you that have subscribed and given us a listen. It's wild to me that we have over 200 people that care to even hear what we have to say. You know what I mean? Like that's really cool. And thanks for interacting with us on socials, because that does mean a lot too. And if you've written in, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't checked us out yet on our socials, go give us some likes and follows to stay in the know about what's coming up with our team and the episodes that we've got coming up. We're Sirens of the Supernatural on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Supernatural Sirens on TikTok.
Awesome. And Ron's going to tell us where you can send your stories in to us.
Yes, and if you have any good reader stories, whether it be hospital stories about it could be anything. We're interested because we like to have new and fresh content. Send it to sirensofthesupernatural@gmail.com. You can do it anonymously, or you can hear your name and your story put online. One of us will read it for you if you don't have a preference, or if you do have a preference, we'll do that as well. It's all about reader interaction. It's about having fun, and we want to hear some of your stories because it's all about you. And let's have some fun and get some stories in there.
Yeah, and if you guys also have any questions for the Shaws, since we're going to be interviewing those, that couple, drop some questions down about aliens, UFOs, any of that good stuff. If you guys are curious, now's the time to ask.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, send those questions in and we'll pull them up and have them ready. We do listen to what you say in the comments and emails. So I guess that's a wrap until next week, guys. It's been fun once again. And as always, we want to tell you listeners out there, stay spooky. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of Sirens of the Supernatural. Please be sure to join us each and every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Sirens of the Supernatural Paranormal Podcast is a production of Monkey Shine Media and copyright 2024 Salt Learning and Technology. Until next time.